Welcome to the Facts versus Feelings podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dietrich, and I'm joined by my co-host, Sonu Varghese. Each week, we dive into the important market-moving events and cut through the noise to help you, as an investor, identify what really matters. Let's get this show started. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 11th episode of Carson's Facts versus Feelings with Ryan and Sonu. Sonu, we have an extremely special guest this week. Do you know who it is?
Extra special guest. Yeah, the one and only Jamie Hopkins.
Hey, guys.
Jamie, before we go there, Jamie, where in the world are you? I make this joke. If I took a map and I threw a dart, you could tell me anywhere because you are truly everywhere. Where are you right now?
So I am sitting on the, the lower west side of Manhattan right now. So yeah, I was in DC this week, and I was in LA, and now New York City. So I have done coast to coast, DC, LA, and New York City all in 1 week. 2 galas and 1 red-eye flight later.
Wow! Did you do a red eye last night? Are you well rested for this podcast?
I'm 1 night away from a red eye, so I did get to sleep last night. I am ready.
Excellent.
Sometimes when it hits you, though, that next day. But nonetheless, we are so honored you're here. And I know partially some of the reason you're traveling so much right now is because you have a brand new book, and we are going to talk a ton about that. But before we got into it, you said you've written like 7 books now. Are you just a glutton for punishment, apparently?
Yeah, and I guess it depends. I'm totally a glutton for punishment. So you can tell by the fact that somebody did a trip to DC on Sunday, flew out to LA and back to New York in the same week, and then back to Philly tomorrow. So that's awful. I also ran 3,004 consecutive days outside during that running streak. I actually broke 3 ribs and ran every day. So, Bert broke a rib and he barely shows up to his computer, and I make fun of him about that now. But broken ribs really hurt. But I've got a high pain tolerance. And I guess in writing world too, I guess it's 7 books now. There was 3 textbooks, 2 ebooks, Rewirement, and now Find Your Freedom. So it's, kind of climbing up there.
Well, that's great. Sonu, I'll let you ask the first question in a second. Jamie, let's just, for the people listening to this podcast, obviously this is more of a, kind of a markets podcast, investments podcast. You're going to talk about planning, which is so very important. But what exactly, and I'm anxious to hear this answer because I'm not 100% sure. What do you do for Carson Group? You do everything, it feels like. What is your day job, if you even have a day job? I joke, I don't have a day job half the time, just running around. What do you do most of the time?
Yeah, so really interesting thing. So my title is, managing partner of Wealth Solutions. And I actually do have a day job, but I'm more well known for all the side stuff I do, right? I mean, my job here is to help run our, financial planning division in essence, right? So I've helped launch, I think, 2 joint ventures and a lead generation offering in the last 2 years. That's actually what I do. Marketing rolls up to me, and I took on a new role kind of heading up retail for us. So tying everything from lead generation and the marketing to clients and our Carson Wealth offering out there, it all kind of rolls up under me. But I spent a lot of time talking, writing, speaking, doing those other things. And that's typically because that's on social media. People then are tie that to my brand, while that's not really my day job.
That's funny because, I go on TV for 3 minutes a week, 4 minutes a week. People think that's all I do all week. I said, no, I actually do some other things. At 3 or 4 minutes, you see my little face on a screen. But there's a ton of stuff to talk about today. Sonu, why don't you start with your first question? We'll just go back and forth, have some fun here.
Yeah, actually just keeping on the theme of Carson, right? And what Jamie does at Carson. Look, Carson is he served about 46,000 plus households, Jamie, right? About
right around
400 advisors around the country.
Yep, that's about right. Those numbers keep going up, which is a good thing for us and good thing for the families being served. One day we want that to be 1 million plus households. I mean, that's our goal, right? We want to be that most trusted in financial advice, and that includes investments and includes planning, and includes insurance, all those things that are important to help somebody, down that path of financial freedom.
And so on that, I think people usually associate planning with investments, right? How to get your portfolio to grow. Ryan and I, obviously, we're talking markets all the time on the podcast, and the intersection of markets with the economy and policy, things like that. But planning is more than just investments, right? It's more than just getting your investment portfolio to, quote unquote, beat the market, right? So maybe you can connect all of that. Talk about how an advisor can help people, help, the 46,000 households that we serve, and go beyond just making an investment portfolio.
Yeah, look, we're on a markets podcast, so I'm not going to downplay the importance of investments, but I will a little bit, right? And so this book, Find Your Freedom, came about a little bit because I asked people about a year ago, it was November a year ago, for their favorite financial planning books. And what I got back was a list of probably about 25 books, and they were all investment books. So that tells you two things, right? Which is the assumption you just brought up, which is a lot of people tie those things together. And in fact, most financial professionals think about those things as pretty linked together. But there are differences between the two, that investments and markets are all part of the planning promise and part of what real financial planning is. And it goes further, right? It's the tax planning, it's tax location, it's estate planning, it's insurance, it's college planning. There's all these different things, budgeting is part of it, gifting. You have a lot of things that go into what planning is. And planning is really about the process. See, markets and investing is often about products and strategies and where things are going and returns, where planning is not so much that big binder somebody hands you and there's all these pages. It's the process that you're engaging in that's the real value there. And I think that's what sometimes people struggle to comprehend, because it's not as tangible then, right? Like you can't pick up a process and like hold it and carry it around and show it to somebody else. It's ongoing forever. And I think that's one of the things that the book is hopefully going to help people with, is get a better understanding of like what you should expect from real financial planning.
So the title is Find Your Freedom. When you hear freedom, Jamie, what does that mean to you? What are you getting at? I mean, investment freedom to do whatever you want in life. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, we actually talk about two different types of freedom in the book. So one is financial freedom. And financial freedom is going to be important for most people to live their true freedom. So when we say, what does freedom mean to me? It means to wake up every day and be able to design my day. That's what freedom means to me. Now, financial freedom means that I don't wake up worried about the trauma that I've experienced with money and let that control my financial decisions. And I'm not going to be able to get to my wake up and design my day if I wake up every day worried about money, right? Like I'll never get there. So we've got to take care of that financial freedom on our way to finding whatever freedom means more holistically for us. And the beautiful thing about that question is it elicits so many interesting responses, and they're always a little bit different. Ron's answer is so much different than mine, and he's in a different part of life, right? Ron helped co-author the book, and Ron's found more freedom, right? But Ron's been there, he's done it, he's built a company, he's had an impact. I'm younger, I'm still trying to get there. So I'm on a different path than Ron is, and I think that part of the book is really cool too, that we get to see both sides of that, somebody on the journey and somebody later in the journey.
One more from me, then Sonu, I'll let you ask one. We're by the time people listen to this, it's going to be right before Thanksgiving. Maybe even someone listening to this after Thanksgiving. So hopefully you had a very fulfilling, freedom-filled eating session there. Jamie, where can someone get this book by the time they're listening to this podcast? And then Sonu, you can fire away with the next question after this.
Yeah.
So the book dropped November 22nd, which is Tuesday, Thanksgiving week, and it's pretty much everywhere. So, I mean, it's on Audible, right? It's at Target, it's Barnes and Nobles, it's Amazon, which is where, a lot of people buy books nowadays. So Kindle versions, and we recorded an audio version. So you can pretty much find it everywhere. So if you Google Find Your Freedom, Jamie Hopkins, you'll be able to purchase this book almost anywhere you'd like to purchase a book.
Awesome.
I have a question for you on that, right? Do you prefer reading or listening to it on Audible if you're getting a book?
For me personally, I am 100% a reader. Books that I read, and so I think you know this about me, so I actually don't read a lot of like non-technical books. So like my favorite book this year was Ron Lieber's How to Plan for College. And like I literally have all these notes written all throughout the book. And then I take that stuff out and I build PowerPoints and presentations off it. So like that tends to be the stuff I read. So I really do need something physical. And I don't even like PDFs of books, honestly. Like if I had that, I'd probably try to print it out, because that whole process of writing notes, circling, underlining, outlining, that's how I then gravitate to the information. So like physical books, and there's something beautiful, like the smell of a book, like bookstores, like I love it, right? Like I love bookstores, and maybe that's one aspect of my freedom is like owning a bookstore and just hanging out in there, selling coffee and books would be pretty cool.
That's your freedom right there. But and you've written the books that way too. I mean, so folks, I've pre-ordered. So go out, pre-order the book. It is great. I've seen a snippet, an early version of this as well. There's Jamie. Find Your Freedom. Jamie Hopkins, Ron Carson. Right. So, and you've written the book that way, right? To be sort of interactive, people can take notes and things like that, right?
Yeah, I actually put like note because a lot of the stuff is, like write your eulogy, write down your virtues that you want to pass to your children, write down the things you want to accomplish there and do SMART goal setting. And I have a variation of that in the book, but most people know SMART goals. And, so we actually leave lines and space in the book to like write all through it. And I think a really cool thing, and I'm going to do this when it's out, I'm actually going to pick 100 random addresses and just send people the book and write a note in them and like literally like no connection to me and just be like, hey, I hope this helps on your path to freedom, and just send them out and to the world and see what happens. So like I think the physical book is interesting, but Ron and I did the audio, and this is the first time I've done an audio book, which is a super interesting process because you start reading your words out loud and you're like, oh, I'd probably state that differently if I had to read it out loud versus read it. So I think that was a really fun process to go through.
So, Jamie, one thing, we're talking about find your freedom, and it sounds great, right? But someone listening might say, what in the world do I do? You need that first step on the journey. What is one thing your average person, maybe kind of thinking like your average investor, what's one step they could do to get to finding their freedom?
So here's what I think is an easier one, which is I would tell people, and I do this a lot in rooms, I say write down the 3 things that you think are your core values. Right? Like to you personally, what matters most to you? And then actually a fun thing to do after that is draw a picture that represents them. So I love those 2 things, and anybody can do that. Right. And so I talk about like grit for myself as one of my core values, right? The ability to overcome things. And then that's a starting point because you kind of set like, okay, what do I really care about? And then you can start thinking about your aspirations and moving towards freedom and defining that. But I think if you don't know what values you hold dear to you, it's very hard to get any further, right? Like you're kind of jumping too far down the road if you don't know what values are going to drive and define your path. So why don't we do that, Ryan? Hey, yeah. Well, look, I run a podcast too, man. I'm going to ask some questions on here, right?
There you
go. So for Ryan and Sonu, give me like, what would be your first core value that if your family and kids were defining you, that they would use, that you'd want them to use, I guess.
Yeah, I think I'll go first. I guess the first word that came up was fun. I think I like that fun. I think my kids know that. My wife knows that. My wife always says I'm kind of the fun one. She's more the disciplinarian, and you got to have one or the other. I enjoy what I'm doing. I was in Omaha this week, hung out at the home office, had dinner with Ron. It was awesome. Just communicating with Ron, seeing the future of this company, which is just going to be amazing. But I just want to enjoy myself. As one thing, Bert and I, when Bert was recruiting me to come to Carson, he's like, what do you want to do? And I listed, I want to do podcasts, I want to do videos, I want to present, I want to write, I want to go on TV. That's the stuff I like to do, right? I don't want to be in a bunch of meetings that, honest to goodness, I don't need to be in. And that's helping me find my freedom. And that's, I don't know, that's why I'm loving it, and that's what I want to keep doing. And if that changes, it changes, but I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. So I want to have fun first, and then just, do the best I can to help this industry and help people.
Yeah, I love that answer. Sonu?
I'll combine the fun piece with respect to what my family would want. I think solidity in a sense, right? Like being there all the time. And, this is half in jest, but, take care of all the meals, right? I love cooking, right? That is a big thing. And Jamie, I think I know that you are there too on that side. I love cooking. I love being in the kitchen, but that's an act of being there for the family in a sense, right? So I think that's how I'd like to think they describe me.
Yeah, we're talking about Thanksgiving week, so it's one of the best times to sit around and eat, be that rock, make the food, right, and enjoy it and have fun. So we can tie all of them in together this week.
Yes,
beautiful.
Right.
So one thing you mentioned, which I really like, I saw this in the book as well, right? Usually, I think when people think about financial planning, they think planning is only for people with money, right? Mm-hmm. And you just mentioned but everybody has values, right? Take a long-term aspirational view, right? And, making planning more accessible is, I think, a big piece of what we try to do here. And I know that's a core philosophy for you as well. So talk about that.
Yeah, so I joined Carson because of that specific reason, right? Ron and Aaron Shaban, our president, came to me and asked me about joining, probably similar to a conversation Bert had with Ryan, and asked me what I wanted to do. There wasn't an open job. I didn't apply to a job. And I said, look, I want to make retirement more secure for Americans. Like, that's it. Like, that's my goal. And to democratize, right, planning so that everybody feels worthy of planning, right? It's not just for people with wealth. Now, look, you can have more larger dollar mistakes when your money is higher, right? Like, that's just reality. If you have more money invested in the market, you got to be a little bit more paying attention to it than if you have zero money invested in the market, right? Like, that makes common sense, right? Those are the wide ranges of the spectrum. But look, everybody has to start somewhere. And a lot of people start from a place of trauma around money where they don't have a lot of money yet. And they're still worthy of planning because that planning can help set them on a path to gain wealth. And every time somebody becomes wealthier, every time somebody gains investment knowledge and starts participating in the markets and starts saving money, that actually raises up the whole country. It raises up the economy, right? We know that as people gain wealth, it's good for everybody. We can spend more, we can plan more. We become less reactive to things and more proactive. So those are good things for everybody. So like, when you think about, can we get planning out to more people? That's going to actually raise the tides or the boats for everybody.
And it seems like it's not just about oneself, right? It's not about, as you write in the book, it's not about being selfish, right? It's actually for loved ones, which I'd never really thought about in a sense before. But seeing it in black and white when you wrote, I was like, wait, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, and I don't know that I knew that. I don't know when that epiphany or whatever came to me, but there was a time period, and I think I was actually working on an estate planning client where I realized that none of the estate planning work is for that person, right? Like, none of it. Like, it's not for you at all. It's all about your loved ones. And then you start thinking about the planning. You're like, well, like, college saving isn't really about me either. It's about my kids. And like, well, like, really good retirement planning is to make sure like the whole family doesn't have to take care of me, and like I don't become a burden on other people. And like, yeah, like, it really does start becoming about the others. And I love this saying too, right? It's like, are you focused on your own individual legacy? Are you focused on the impact of like your family and the impact on the world? And I think really great leaders often, whether you're thinking about in the business world or even great leaders at home, think about the impact that their family and that unit is going to have, and not just about their own personal legacies.
That's great stuff. I mean, one of my favorite quotes on planning, maybe you've used it. President Eisenhower said, "Plans are useless, but planning is everything." So, Jamie, it's amazing how fast this is going. We've got about 10 minutes, but I want to kind of get a little more personal here. Most people might not know this, and I'd like to know the stories too. I mean, you were a world-class swimmer, and you trained with Michael Phelps. Am I correct there?
You are correct. Yeah. So interestingly,
give us a story about Michael Phelps. You know where this is going. Give us your Michael Phelps story.
Yes.
Oh, so you want a fun story? You want the training story? So I got a couple good stories. So one is
something fun.
We've got a funny one that's worthy of a podcast talk.
Right.
Which a lot of people always used to talk about when we were kids. We got out of practice, somebody's birthday, and it must have been around Halloween. I don't remember whose birthday it was anymore. And we were at North Baltimore Aquatic Club at up in NBAC, and we were swimming there. And Michael and I must have been like the last two out of the pool that day. I don't know why. I mean, Michael was often doing more laps and stuff, and usually I was like the first one out. So I don't know why I was still in the water. But I hop out, and Michael and I hop out, and there's these cupcakes for somebody's birthday, and we were probably 13 at this point, 12 or 13, and they had like the pumpkin candy corns on the top, right? But there was only one left, and so I grabbed it before him. Right, I beat him to it. First time I ever beat him at anything, and I beat him to this cupcake. And he smacks it out of my hand onto the ground on the pool deck. Right, cupcake's gone, and I pick up that pumpkin candy corn, and I peg him as hard as I possibly can in the back. And he chases me around this pool for like the next 20 minutes, just running through circles, running through the locker room. And, he does eventually catch me and like tackles me. And, it's just this whole thing over a pumpkin candy corn cupcake. Now, it's just a funny memory I have of him and me. And, I love Michael. He's done amazing things. He's grown up to be like such a good dad and professional and voice out there for people struggling with depression and mental health. And, he's somebody like that story, like that's, growing up with him. He was just Michael. And I remember I didn't really get that until I got to college and somebody had a poster of him in my freshman dorm, right? Like I've known him since I was 6 years old. Like we roomed together, we trained together, we ate cheesesteaks together, like played N64, Mario Kart. He was better than me at that too. But I got to college and I was like, man, like what's Michael doing up on this person's wall? Like first thing I see freshman year. And then I kind of realized that like, this guy might be kind of a big deal.
I mean, I don't want to dive too into this, but was it obvious when he was 12, like he was going to be like the greatest swimmer to ever walk the face of the earth? It was obvious when he was 12, 13. You just knew it?
I think at like 8, like at 8 years old, he was breaking all the state records, and at like 10 he had broken all the national age group records. And around 12 or 13 though, it really did kind of like, because he went to his first Olympics at 15, so at like 13
Okay.
he was like so he was like the youngest male swimmer or youngest, I think, male Olympian when he went to Sydney when he was 15. And he was like one of the tallest guys on the team at 15, and the sports changed. Bert did that at Excel and talked about how much taller. I told him that, and then he went and found all the data points, which like I always kind of like I smooth things out a little bit more, but like they got so much taller. Like from when he started, he fundamentally changed the talent that went into the sport. And Bob Bowman was a great coach. He's been on a Framework before with us, the show, and I think he's like 6-time Olympic coach. And the main thing that Bob taught me was about the importance of process. And so we have that team, NBAC, and we put out, I don't know, we've probably put out 30 Olympians or something crazy like that out of North Baltimore. Maryland Crabs and Old Bay don't make us faster swimmers, right? That's a uniquely small team that committed to a process and was just really forward-looking, before others were changing the way they trained, like the way that Michael stretched. We stopped doing static stretching back in the 90s. And that was when UCLA and other places were coming out with that research that just like pulling your arm and your leg to the side was actually causing more injuries than it was helping. And Bob brought that into a team like of swimmers back in the 90s, like before the NFL even got there. And so that's why Michael, we always remember him flapping his arms and throwing everything around.
Right.
And we moved to that type of stretching. And, that, to me, like had a huge impact on everybody. We were just ahead of the times at that point.
Wow. Now, one more question for me here, and then Sonu, you can jump in. Great stories there. We could probably talk a while on that, but good stuff. So let's just say, someone listening to this, because we feel it every day, right? We're out there talking to our partners, advisors, their clients. Jamie, people are really worried. 40-year highs in inflation, rough year for bonds, rough year for stocks. I mean, how could someone even start a plan right now if they don't have any faith in what's going on around them?
So I think this is the best reason to have a plan. So what I talk about, I mentioned in the book too, what planning helps you do is get that ROS, return on sleep. It lets you look at those things that you are worried about and start to figure them out. It doesn't mean that you have 100% answer, right? Like, look, inflation is high, right? Relative to where it's been recently. We're not going to change where inflation numbers are when you do planning. But you can figure out which investments you're going to be in that might help offset some of that risk, right? And it's not perfect, but you can start going down there. If you're a retiree, how do we adjust the portfolio or Social Security strategy to deal with inflation? Are we buying certain products, tips or inflation-adjusted insurance products to help with that? Like there are strategies. And so what's on top of your mind from a risk perspective, what's keeping you up at night is often a very good place to start. Because if we let those concerns, whether it's market volatility, midterm elections, the war, any of those things kind of run rampant in our mind, we start making bad decisions. We want to recognize those feelings, like on facts and feelings, and then we want to do something about them. And we want to put parameters and guardrails in place and go through that process so that we feel more comfortable where we are. Because, ultimately, I use this example sometime when I present. I said, if I had 2 plans for you, and in one of those plans, right, a financial plan, use the most efficient financial plan ever created, right? Like you will end up with you'll end up with 10 times more money than you ever thought you would. It's the most efficient plan ever. But you are going to live a very kind of average happiness life. You're just going to be okay. You're not going to be like a 10. You're not going to be a 1. You're going to be like a 5. Or I got another plan. It's going to have half as much money, but you're going to live the happiest life you've ever lived. Which one do you want? So far, I have not met anybody that says they want to have the most money possible and live a not very happy life. And I think, to me, that's where you get to, well, planning's not just about increasing returns or getting the most money possible. It's about aligning our life and our happiness. And so we can not be worried about inflation and mortgage rates, and that we can focus on being fun and being that rock to your family and cooking food and enjoying Thanksgiving without waking up and stressing over where the markets are today.
I feel like that also makes the case for having an advisor, in a sense, right? Somebody to coach you through all of this.
Yeah, I think a big value of advisors, if you look at some of the things like Vanguard's Advisor Alpha study, Morningstar's Alpha, Beta, now Gamma, what you see is from that research that they find the impact of an advisor is actually mostly on the behavioral side. It's on the planning side. It's when you're feeling really stressed out and you're about to overreact to something that you have a third party that's not as emotional about it and is a little bit more disinterested in the sense of your day isn't impacting their decisions on your money, right? Like if your car gets hit and it ruins your whole day, right? And you're really upset. What are you going to do? And having somebody else there to be that coach and that guide for you is really useful. And so I think advisors are, and I actually say this in the book, like all three of us work at a firm that does financial advice and investments for people. And I say in the book, like everybody doesn't need an advisor, right? There are people that are okay without having an advisor. But if you're feeling that stress level, it probably is a good time to talk to somebody and find the right person that matches up with you to help with your investments or planning or insurance, or just be that kind of coach that walks alongside of you.
No, it's great.
Yeah, you mentioned, a little bit about Carson there. I mean, we call our advisors our partners, Carson Partners. You've been here for a while. What is one thing that makes our community stand out to you, Jamie? Because you work extensively with our advisors. Well, it just feels like a real legit, they love each other community. What do you feel?
Yeah, there's two things I usually tell about that. One is we are a planning first firm, right? Ron started in that world. It's embedded. Our wholly owned office advisors, right? We made a commitment to be CFP professionals a couple years back when I joined up. And that's kind of the highest education standard on the planning side out there. So that's one key differentiator. I wish that was not a differentiator, right? Like it actually is not great that I can say, hey, we differentiate because we do planning and we do, planning education. But in the general world today, like that's a small subset of the financial professional world. The second one is the advisors and partners that we have today here chose to be here. And that is a very unique thing out there in the world, right? Like we didn't get merged with another giant firm and like a bunch of people used to work somewhere else and now they all work here and they didn't want to be here. Our partners chose to be here. Our advisors chose to be here. They chose to be part of this community, and the way that we, talk about freedom, the way that we look at planning and investments, right? Like they chose to be in this. And that is very different than a lot of other worlds where not everybody, ran in there and wanted to be part of that brand promise and wanted to be part of that culture. Everybody here chooses to be here, and I love that.
Oh, love it too. I have to give a quick personal update, because last time we did this podcast, I was going off to buy some Taylor Swift tickets, and I've had so many people reach out to me. Did you get them? Because you've probably heard what happened. It took me 4 hours to get those silly Taylor Swift tickets, but I did get them. And here's the crazy thing. It's almost like the stars aligned. My flight in Cincinnati was actually delayed, so I had to spend like 4 hours at the airport. Had I not done that, because I was still on hold with Ticketmaster, I would not have gotten my daughter the tickets. I was so mad. It took me like 6 extra hours to get to Omaha, and I looked back and said, you know what? Maybe it was a sign that the Ticketmaster shut down for hours on end. But I did walk away with 6 tickets, so you do the math. I spent a ton of money on these tickets, and anyway, she was happy. I was not thrilled, but eventually got to Omaha. So that was interesting. And then she's going to Philadelphia. You going to that? You going to Taylor Swift?
Yeah.
You going, Jamie? No?
I'm not, but I did go to the Country Music Awards last week. So I did attend the Country Music Awards in Nashville. We had an event there, Excel Represent, with some of our advisors and partners. And one of our teammates knew somebody and got us in, and we went to that, and that was very cool. So my daughter's a big Taylor Swift fan, but she's pretty young, so she doesn't even know that she's 6, so she doesn't know there's a concert. So she doesn't know the Ticketmaster, fiasco, none of that. But I think there'll be a time in my life when I'll be taking her and sitting in some 4-hour online queue to figure out how to get tickets. So
I made the comment, like, I go on TV, I present in front of hundreds of people, thousands of people. I was more nervous trying to buy these tickets than anything I've ever done live. And I'm dead serious. Like, I really mean I was. Jamie, it's amazing how fast 30 minutes is gone. We're at the end. This is the last question for you. Any final comments, any final wisdom you want to embark to the Facts versus Feelings podcast community here? And then we're going to sign off.
Yeah, let's tie it all together here with a nice Thanksgiving bow, which is I'm going to close out with gratitude today. So one question that's great to ask, it's a little bit different, right, is, if you're sitting around at Thanksgiving, you want to find that freedom, think about your planning and investments, ask people around the table, who's somebody that in your past you should have given gratitude and thanks to, but you didn't. Right? Like, not, I'm grateful for my parents, my siblings, but who's somebody that in your past you should have given gratitude and thanks to, but you didn't? Because it's a harder question. And I actually answered that in the book, which was Miss Pendergast. She was my math teacher when I was a little kid. And I wasn't great at math. And she helped me learn math because she committed and she cared. And she used to ask my parents, my grandparents, how I was doing, 20 years after I left that school. And I think about all the people that she impacted. And, she knew that I cared about her, but I never really got to go back and say how thankful I was to her and gracious for that impact she had on my life. And, she's since passed away. But I think it's a little bit of me feels, that I put it in the book as a way to say that I was grateful for the impact she had on my life. So that's a really great one to kind of lead off this. And if you can do that, it's going to take you down that path to freedom, searching what matters to you and share that with your loved ones.
Love it. That's awesome, Jamie. Well, from Sonu and I and everyone, we really appreciate you taking some time with us, and just thank you for all you do for the industry to help so many people find their freedom. And guys, if this podcast didn't make you go out and buy Jamie's book, I don't know what will. So definitely go out and support that. Check it out. Let us know what you think. And with all that, Facts versus Feelings number 11 is in the books. Sonu and I will be back next week. Everyone, hopefully either you had Thanksgiving or you're about to. We hope you have an awesome Thanksgiving. Eat a bunch of food. We'll come back and talk about it next week. We'll see everybody then. Bye-bye. Information provided on Facts versus Feelings with Sonu Varghese and Ryan Dietrich are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. The statements and opinions of show guests may not be reflective of CWM LLC or its affiliates. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested in directly. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial or tax advisor prior to investing. Guests on Facts versus Feelings are not affiliated with CWM LLC.